Hey there, my name is Alex, and it's time to review Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 1, Dragonstone. And well, I'm not going to waste any time, let's get straight into it. And the first scene of the show was, well, Arya. And she's imitating Walder Frey, but instead of doing anything useful with this position of power, she just wipes them all out. Could well be within her character that she's driven too much by revenge to be rational, very predictable, but how did she manage to poison everyone by herself? I don't remember her studying poisons in the show, although she did in the books. And even knowing how to make poison, how exactly do you poison that many people at once by yourself? Are we supposed to take from this that she disguised herself as like someone in the kitchens, or no one managed to figure out what happened during all this time? It's more evidence of people in this show basically having superpowers and being able to do whatever they want to do within the scene. A scene written to be more cool or badass than logical, which is emblematic of the show at this point. So, fitting way to start the season, if a disappointing one. On the other hand, whilst perhaps we didn't need to see the journey of Meera and Bran to the Wall, it's one of those concessions you make for a TV show. I can't help but wonder how they managed to survive. Remember, it took them most of a season to get from the Wall to the three-eyed douchebag, and Meera had to drag Bran the entire way back, because they had no Hodor. And in the scene right before this, they showed the Night's King and all the zombies heading south. So how did they manage to stay ahead of them exactly? When Meera has to drag Bran, they have to stop and eat and sleep. Presumably Meera has to hunt, so they have something to eat. And they somehow manage to stay ahead of the zombies who don't eat or sleep or ever need to stop. I mean, I guess maybe you can say that's nitpicking, but it just struck me as odd. Still, it's nice seeing Bran having matured and taken to his new role. It's one of those things that does make a lot of sense in the TV version. You can't have the same actor start as a kid and play a kid for 5 years, because he's very clearly no longer a kid. It makes sense that he has matured both physically and mentally, and as a character. When Jon mentioned everyone 10 to 60, I was immediately reminded of that part in the books where he's recruiting wildling boys. Then the girls want to know why they can't fight too. And also, 10 to 60. In a medieval setting, 60 is pretty damn old. I'm guessing they just applied sort of modern sensibilities to it to, suggest that he's taking people within a wide age range. Sansa making such a public argument with Jon, not sure what to make of that. Did she realise that it's a really stupid thing to do and do it anyway because she's feeling petty? Or was she somehow still too ignorant to know the sort of effect it would have? Still, both had a valid point here. Sansa's logic that traitors should be punished and loyalty rewarded makes sense, but so did Jon's refusal to strip them of their seats. It's convenient that there's much precedent for this happening in the books. Guess what they do there? They strip the house of their lands, but not their ancestral seat. The Umbers don't just have Last Hearth, they are lords over a vast amount of northern land. Strip them of some of that, allow them to keep Last Hearth. I guess that was too complicated a solution. I suppose you could make the argument that northern lands aren't as desirable as those down south, but whatever. It is a solution that Jon, Sansa, or at least Davos, should be fully aware of. I'm guessing they just needed some stupid cause of conflict though. I mentioned how it was nice to see Bran mature, but it seems Sansa isn't doing much of that. It makes perfect sense that she would be reminded of Joffrey, but even in the books, she matured from being such a petty little girl and became somewhat politically minded under Littlefinger's guiding finger. In the show, she seems to be kinda thick. The fact that she dares to say, oh, Ned made stupid mistakes and lost his head for it, is unbelievable. Has she forgotten that her father lost his head because she betrayed his plans to the Lannisters, and then he effectively shat all over the one thing that meant so much to him, honour, just to protect his daughters and her specifically, and he still died for it, because Joffrey went back on his word. What an ungrateful bitch. About the only part I liked from these scenes, well, concerning Sansa, was her line, "I learned a great deal from Cersei." Because that much at least is true. and she delivered the line well. I'm not really sure what to make of Cersei and Jaime in the show. Cersei has been fairly consistent throughout the show, but Jaime flops back and forth constantly like a wet fish. I find it a little aggravating that Cersei detonated most of the Tyrells and the largest church in the Seven Kingdoms, I think, and yet the million-some peasants in King's Landing are totally okay with that. There's no revolt or anything. Likewise, I don't understand how the Lannisters still have an army after this many seasons, years of fighting. I guess we can ignore that too. Jaime, in prior seasons, and in the books, demonstrated that he cared not at all for his children. But now he seems to care for Tommen, calling him his baby boy. Granted, he did seem to be closest to him in the books. Like, he didn't dislike Tommen and Myrcella. His derision mostly remained with Joffrey, but Cersei says we're the last Lannisters and then adds the ones who matter. I'm guessing that's both an acknowledgement and dismissal of all the extended family the Lannisters have. I don't even remember what Kevin's up to at this point in the show. Is he still alive? Did he get exploded in the church? I don't know. Speaking of which, they say all the Freys are dead, but that's only the leaders of House Frey, Walder Frey and all his sons and grandsons. What is going to happen to their thousands of soldiers, hundreds of knights, all the women and small folk? Are they going to remain with the Lannisters? Are they going to disband? I don't really know what their logic there is. But here's what I was expecting the scene as a whole to go. They acknowledge the need for food, so the logical decision is to annex the Tyrell lands. Why? A. Stop them siding with Dany. B. Claim the fertile lands and grain. If I recall correctly, in the books, the Iron Men are already attacking the Tyrell lands at this point anyway, at least to the extent of claiming the Shield Islands. And before moving on to the Ironborn, I gotta bring up one more thing. Who the hell are those new black armoured Kingsguard? Why are they wearing black? Is it because the white ones weren't edgy enough for Cersei and now literally every character in the show now has to wear black? But yes, the Ironborn. It's nice to hear them talking about the first Greyjoy rebellion, but doesn't really make too much sense for them to bring it up here. It made sense for Jaime to bring up how they burnt the Lannister fleet, but then they never mention Robert or Stannis, and seem to accredit it instead to the Lannisters. I get that Jaime is the one talking, so he might try and claim some of the victory for himself, but Euron doesn't exactly correct him. Is he trying to ingratiate himself with them? I don't know. Euron in the show is very, very strange, and I'm not really sure what to make of him. Also, the line, "If you hadn't crushed us, I wouldn't have gone into exile," doesn't really make much sense. I'm guessing in the show, he was exiled for some other reason. I don't remember if they ever brought it up, because in the books, he was exiled by Balon, his brother, because he raped Victarion's wife, leading to Victarion beating her to death with his bare hands. Did they ever explain why he was exiled in the show? I don't remember. And to touch again on the everyone's wearing black thing, I get they don't want to have bright colours because the show is edgy and grimdark, but there is no colour. Euron didn't even have a hint of gold about him. If I remember correctly, the Greyjoy colours are a gold kraken on a black field. Did he have any gold krakens on him? Did he have any krakens on him at all? Nope, he was wearing like a leather biker jacket with stars or maybe starfish on them. Whatever. I'm not really sure what to say about Sam's scene. Nothing in particular stood out to me. Now, during the books, Sam isn't long in Old Town before he's brought before one of the more bizarre maesters, and we get hints that there are very strange things afoot in the Citadel, the glass candles for example. In the show, it's more about him being in the life of a novice, eager to learn restricted information from the restricted section in the library, which is very, Harry Potter-esque. I guess this is just one of those things we'll have to see where it leads. The second scene was bizarre. I couldn't remember if Stannis had mentioned it in the show, but in the books he was mining obsidian from his old seat, which he kept in the books, lightly held until the Tyrells took it. More on that in a bit. But here Sam kind of goes, Stannis, and then just trails off. So it's like they acknowledged that they had kind of wrote themselves into a corner there, so they just like went, nah, that's not important anymore. And they were also maybe implying that Valyrian steel is obsidian. I don't really get what he meant by that. Also, I guess he's been teaching Gilly how to read. Jorah Mormont is in Old Town. If I remember, Dany told him to piss off and cure himself, so I guess he went to the Citadel. I mean, that seems like a fair assumption, and I'm sure he is going to be cured, and Sam's probably going to be the one to cure him. Maybe he'll use the information from the restricted section of the library, and Dumbledore will be very unhappy. Arya's scene with the Lannister troops. I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't as predictable as I expected it to be. I actually liked this scene. I thought it was a little bit pointless in the grand scheme of things, a bit fillery, but it was kind of like world building, you know, much like Brienne, whatever, in the 4th book. You can cut out 90% of her chapters, 90% of her content in that book, and still know what's happening, but some of it is nice world building, like with Maester Merribold, or whatever he was called. I expected the scene to end with her butchering all those Lannister soldiers, and for them to all be evil, but yes, I liked that scene. I'm going to be a little disappointed if we cut back to it in the next episode and she's killed them all anyway. Also, it was interesting to hear Simon Silvertongue's song about Tyrion and Shae. Even if I don't really think it makes sense in the context of the world for it to exist here, I guess it's, you know, just an Easter egg for people who have read the books to go, haha, I recognise that reference. I guess I'm glad I didn't see Arya butchering Ed Sheeran, I think. But the scene with the Hound and Beric's men, I liked this one too, and it's one of the few parts of the show that intrigues me. I'm curious to see where it's going, as of course, most of these characters are no longer in the books. Beric is well and truly dead, Thoros is alive, but the fire seems to have gone out of him and he seems to have lost his cause, and the Hound is most likely just a gravedigger. Speaking of which, it tickled my fancy that he did dig a grave in this scene. But the premise of it in general I enjoy, as I like the actors for the Hound, Beric and Thoros. I think they're all very well cast and they bring their characters consistently to life. And I think they have an interesting chemistry, interesting dynamics between them as a group. Now when they find the 2 corpses in the corner, I'm not really sure what I was supposed to take from that, from a literal sense. If it's so cold, will the corpses be preserved? I don't know, and this isn't a complaint. I just honestly wasn't sure if this was supposed to be a recent event or something that happened ages ago. Are they supposed to be the 2 that the Hound and Arya came across, like, back in season 4, like ages ago? Aside from that, I understand the symbolism the scene was trying to convey. Also, I've always enjoyed the looking into the fire aspect, because it is one of those things. If you stare at flames long enough, you will start to see weird things. I'm not talking about fantasy visions or anything like that, but staring at fire has a weird impact on your vision in a literal sense. You will see weird things, your eyes will get messed up. So, do the characters in this show, in the books, really see what they see, or do they see what they want to see? In the books, I think it's fairly ambiguous a lot of the time, whereas in the show it's more clear-cut that he is seeing a literal vision of something. But even then, I liked that they didn't show it, they just showed his reaction to it. I think that was definitely the much better way to go about it. It would have looked really cheesy if they'd, like, shown some cutaway to the wall. Better to just rely on the actor's skill at conveying his sort of what he's seeing with his face. Daenerys and her scenes. Where to begin? They mentioned Dragonstone had a port for their boats. I'm sure they did, I'm not going crazy. They mentioned that in this very same episode, and then they show a crappy little beach with a little rowboat going up to it. Is it on the other side of the island they have the ports? Maybe, but that's the same beach they had Stannis on in like season 2, or season 3, I don't remember. Apparently in the show it's basically just a rock with a beach and a big castle. No gargoyles either, apparently, and gee, what a non-surprise they're all wearing black here too. The battles sure are going to be confusing when everyone is wearing black. It really is sort of dumb that Stannis completely abandoned the castle in the show. That's just not what people do. And if he did, why did nobody else capture it? You'd think the Lannisters might have gone, oh hey, there's a completely abandoned and free castle here for the taking. Let's send 100 people, maybe even 50 people, to occupy it and hold it with a light garrison. Nope, they just abandoned one of the most famous castles in Westeros for no reason, so that Dany could take it for free. Even more ridiculous that they know she's going there and they don't do anything about it. Is it supposed to be that between the time Jaime goes there, probably going for Dragonstone, that they didn't have time to send anyone there, even though in the show people can teleport across like hundreds, thousands of miles in a single episode? Even more ridiculous when you see what a fortress it is in this show. It has an extremely narrow path, almost a causeway, leading up to the castle. You could have 100 men stop 10, 20, 50 times their number in a defensive position there. Also, I knew about halfway into this scene, like when they got onto the beach and started walking and no one was saying anything, I was thinking to myself, I know exactly how this episode is going to end. Dany is going to finally get into the castle, like to the throne room or something, and go, let us begin. And then it will hard cut to black. Sometimes the show is way too predictable because that's exactly what happened. She walked into the castle, she walked past the throne room, she went to the big table map thing that Aegon made, and she said, shall we begin? Didn't they actually end an episode a few seasons ago the same way with Sansa? Like, she came down the staircase looking all like evil and went, let us begin. Being predictable in this show is not a good thing at all. Next episode preview seems to have some sand snake garbage to look forwards to. Maybe all of them will gather in the church of the Red Viper and then someone will blow them up too. But thoughts overall on this first episode? It was alright. As usual, the visuals of the show give me virtually no complaints outside of everyone wearing black. The production values and acting, with a few exceptions, are handled very well in Game of Thrones. Once again, it's just the writing where it falls flat. Characters are not only often butchered from the source material, but most of the time inconsistent within their show counterparts. Sometimes I think this is the result of the writers flip-flopping back and forth between source material and the show. Other times I think it's just because of incompetence and them not having a clear vision for the character. I'm a little more optimistic for the next episode as it's written by Brian Cogman, but all in all I have to point out that I do not have high hopes for the series. People sometimes ask, why do you watch it when you just seem to hate it and whine about it? It's not strictly true. Most of the review is complaining about shit, you might say, but it's largely the writing and characterization. I enjoy this show for the visuals. When I read the books, which have their own set of problems, I enjoy the characterization. I think that's the strongest asset of the books. For the HBO show, I enjoy the visuals, seeing these characters, castles, locations all brought to life. I think most of the casting decisions in the show are quite good. The visuals and the audio are on point. That said, let's see where it goes from here. Thank you so much for watching.